For so the children come, and so they have been coming. Always in the same way they come. No angels herald their beginnings. No prophets predict their future courses. No wise men see a star to show where to find the babe that will save humankind. Yet each night a child is born is a holy night. Parents sitting beside their children's cribs feel glory in the sight of new life beginning. They ask, where and how will this new life end? Or will it ever end? Each night a child is born is a holy night, a time for singing, a time for wondering, a time for worshiping.
As we light our Advent wreath and our chalice, I'd like to share these words from Erika Hewitt. Tonight, we light the Advent candles for the last time this year. We light the candle of hope for that which is best in us to rise and enliven our souls and our relationships. The second candle we light for peace, for the courage to soften what is rigid in our hearts, to find that soft spot and stay with it. We light the third candle, the pink one, in the name of joy. Joy in the shape of gratitude for all that is our life, and joy in expectation of the world that we are building and creating for one another. The last candle, this one chokes me up every time, is lit in the name of love as the creating force in our lives. And finally, we light the central candle, the light that shines in the darkness.
There was a bunch of
full
links in
power
that. I
of
should have
faith.
read it all through carefully.
We know, says Reverend Bill Sinkford, how real the
I
brokenness
don't hear
of the
anything yet.
world is. But we will not give brokenness the last word. May this light bear our hopes as well as our faith in love, in goodness, in compassion.
Turn off your audio,
justice.
please.
The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness shall never overpower it. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to First Church Unitarian in Littleton on this special night, the eve of Christmas. My name is Lara Hoke, pronouns she, her, and I am fortunate to serve this wonderful congregation. Special thanks to everyone who helped to make this evening come together, and for all of you participating tonight, and for all of you for being here. Your presence makes this truly special. And thank you for those who are with us online as well. You are so welcome here. So good to be together. We begin with our opening hymn, and I'll invite you to rise in body or spirit. The lyrics are in the inserts, and also they'll be on the screens. Our first carol is "O Come, All Ye Faithful." be seated.
My reading this evening is Into the Darkest Hour by Madeleine L'Engle. It was a time like this, war and tumult of war, a horror in the air. Hungry yawned the abyss, and yet there came the star and the child most wonderfully there. It was a time like this, of fear and lust for power, license and greed and blight, and yet the Prince of Bliss came into the darkest hour in quiet and silent light. And in a time like this, how celebrate his birth when all things fall apart? Ah, wonderful it is with no room on the earth. The stable is in our heart.
So I invite the children, if they'd like to come sit up on the floor here near David. David Grober wrote this story that you're going to hear this evening. So I'm going to let him take it from here.
Thank you, Thea. Okay. Remind me not to shout. Folks, you have the most beautiful choir. It's just amazing. It's amazing. So, my daughter, Katya, is home for Christmas. Thank you. And many years ago, when Katya was about, well, I think younger than any of you, she asked me the question, did I believe? Believe in what, sweetie? I asked her back. Dad, do you believe in Santa? In Christmas, in magic, in everything? Kids ask the biggest questions. So I told her about something that happened to my brother and I on a Christmas Eve when we were boys. And I'd like to tell you what happened. First, you need to know two things. Our family always opened presents on Christmas Eve, not on Christmas morning. Old German tradition. The second thing you need to know is that the present that my brother and I wanted more than anything in the world was electric trains. Our wish list consisted of two words written over and over again. Electric trains, electric trains. We wrote letters to Santa at the North Pole. We prayed to Santa before bedtime. We slipped notes into the collection plates of Salvation Army Santas. Never do this, never do this. We also asked our mom and dad for the electric train, but it was a big, expensive present, and we figured we had a better chance with Santa. For weeks, we were extra nice to everybody. I brushed all my teeth twice a day. We were so good. We'd seen exactly the electric train we wanted, too, in a store window downtown, right by my father's office. The train had a big black locomotive, 4 freight cars, and a bright red caboose. My brother and I would lie awake every night, and we'd talk about how we plan to set up the tracks and build the village and run the train. So on this Christmas Eve, my brother and I were standing at the living room window. We're waiting for our father to come home from work. He worked late a lot. And we waited and we waited. It was nearly 6 o'clock, and we see him in his long coat walking from the train station. Is he carrying anything? My brother asked. No, just a newspaper. We ran to the front door. The key turned in the lock. The door opened. Dad gave us each a pat on the head, but he didn't say anything. He put down his newspaper, took off his coat, and then he and Mom went into their bedroom and closed the door. This was good, my brother said, because on Christmas Eve, Mom and Dad always disappeared into their bedroom and wrapped presents. And then my brother made a sad face, and he asked David, he said, do you think they're wrapping Santa's presents too? I told him no. I told him Santa wraps his own presents, which seemed to satisfy him, but I was having my doubts. My brother and I, we pressed our ears against the bedroom door, and we listened. And here's what we heard. We heard my dad telling my mom how he'd found the perfect electric train with a big black locomotive, 4 freight cars, and a bright red caboose. We heard him tell Mom how he'd opened the box to make sure there was nothing broken or missing, and how he repacked it and wrapped it with silver paper and a red bow, and how he carried it under his arm as he left his office. And we heard how he found a seat on the crowded train, and he set the box down next to him, And he read the newspaper until just before the train arrived at his stop. And then he reached for the box, and it was gone. The box was gone. The electric train was gone. He'd looked everywhere. He asked the other passengers if they'd seen the box with the silver wrapping and the red bow. And no one had seen it. We couldn't believe it. Our train was lost on the train. The bedroom doorknob started to turn, so we ran back down the hall to our room, and we were both crying. "What are we going to do?" I asked. And my little brother, he stopped crying. He looks at me very seriously. "I think we should be happy. Dad is unhappy. We should be happy without the electric train." Coming from a 6-year-old, this seemed like good advice. We sat on our beds, waiting for Mom and Dad to call us, trying to be happy without the electric train. And finally, they called us to gather by the piano. One of the family rules, traditions, was music before presents. My brother hugged my dad and shouted, "Come on, let's sing some songs," and we did. Dad played the piano, we sang "O Christmas Tree" and "Silent Night," and all 12 days of Christmas. And the whole time, my brother and I are sneaking glances at the packages under the tree. Finally, my father closes the piano keyboard, and he's about to let us loose when the doorbell rings. My mom goes to the front door, and she returns holding this big box with silver wrapping and a red bow. "Nobody was there," she says, but someone left this. Now, this is the strangest moment, and years later, my brother and I have talked about this, and we remember it differently. I remember my father just staring at the package like he's Superman with X-ray vision. My brother remembers my father taking the package from my mom and shaking it a bit. We both remember my father opening the front door again and looking up and down the empty street. Finally, my brother can't stand it anymore and cries out, "Hey, can we please open our presents now?" And my father, still looking pretty confused, whispers, "Okay." And he sets the silver box on the floor in front of us. "Go ahead, open it." And we tore off that red bow and that silver wrapping, and we opened that box. So while I connected the power supply, my brother set up the tracks. We unwrapped the big black locomotive, the 4 freight cars, and finally the caboose. And this train looked a lot like the electric train that my father had bought and checked and wrapped and taken most of the way home. But it wasn't the same electric train. The caboose was bright yellow. So yes, Katya, I believe in Santa and Christmas and magic and everything, and I hope I always will. Thanks.
Thank you. I should have noted we're singing the traditional lyrics to our carols this evening, but in Unitarian Universalist tradition, if you wish to correct the theology as you go, be my guest. So our next 2 carols are going to be Joy to the World and O Little Town of Bethlehem, and I invite you to rise in body or spirit. wish, you may be seated for our second carol. Relax. If you wish. But if you wish to stand. I gotta pick a side. I think stay as you are.
My reading tonight is Let Us Be That Stable, excerpt from Patrick Murfin. Today, let us be that stable. Let us be the place that welcomes at last the weary and rejected, the pilgrim stranger, the coming life. Let our outstretched arms be a manger, so that the infant hope, swaddled in love, may have a place to lie. Let a cold beacon shine down upon us from a solstice sky to guide to us the seekers who will come. Let the lowly shepherd and all who abide in the fields of their labors lay down their crooks and come to us. Let herdsmen and high lords kneel together under our thatched roof to lay their gifts before wonder. Today, let us be that stable.
Thank you. It is the tradition of this congregation to take special offerings once a month. We also have a tradition of collecting a special offering on Christmas Eve, and tonight's offering will go to Loaves and Fishes. Loaves and Fishes' mission is to provide nutritious food in an atmosphere of kindness and respect to people in need. First Church Unitarian has long given contributions to this wonderful charity. If you wish to write a check, please make it out to Loaves and Fishes. All loose cash in the plates will go directly to Loaves and Fishes. May our generosity continue tonight. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation. Please join me in the words of our response. We are grateful for the opportunity to share our gifts. May they bring an added measure of joy in this holiday season. Our next carol is It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, and I invite you to rise in body or spirit.
Lord.
I think most of us are familiar with the basics of the nativity story. Well, it's really two nativity stories, two official stories, the one in the Gospel of Luke with the shepherds, which is different in several ways from the story in the Gospel of Matthew with the wise men or the magi. But we blend these two stories together in our minds, creating an amalgam that has the shepherds and the wise men all together, along with, of course, the angels and Herod and tax collection and the census and the no room at the inn, even though they go back and forth between Luke and Matthew as to where the stories are sourced. But most importantly, we always have, of course, Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus. But there are other stories in there too. If you listen between the lines, Bill Schultz was a former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and he pointed out what he called some secreted stories. As Schultz puts it, sometimes we are so enthralled with the inn and the manger, the shepherds and the angels, that we fail to notice the other great themes that weave in and out of the tale. Schultz writes, "The Christmas story is, for instance, a story of sisterhood. In the first chapter in the Gospel of Luke, we learn that after she has conceived by the Holy Spirit, Mary spends 3 months in the company of the elderly Elizabeth, whose own womb has also been mysteriously filled. The two women greet each other with rejoicing and sustain each other in the wonder of their circumstances." And Schultz reminds us that it is a story of glory come to the poor. He writes, "Whatever the exact nature of their material state, Mary and Joseph are hardly people of wealth or power. That God should choose them to be the agents of this holy moment is a hint that Jesus' mission will be a revolutionary one." And finally, Schultz reminds us that it is a story of civil disobedience. He writes, Herod instructs the wise men to find the child's location and report it to him, but the wise men defy Herod's instructions. Schultz is right. The Christmas story is so much more than the bare facts of the tale. And sometimes what's not plainly written is more important and more interesting than what is. It reminds me of a prose piece I know, a piece that contains yet another secreted story within the Christmas story. It's a piece called Advent Absentee, and it's set in the late 20th century, modern times. The piece was written by Sylvia Sands, and it describes one woman's experience of putting out her Christmas creche. She writes, "Here I go again, carefully unpacking the figures of the crib, tenderly wiping dust from Mary's eyes and Joseph's beard, all the while practicing my contemplative skills. Here I am, duster in hand, seeking to emulate the shepherd's enthusiasm and openness. Wipe, wipe. The wise men's courage and generosity, dust, dust. Mary's mysticism, Joseph's humility, the Christ child's vulnerability. Who am I kidding? It is the absent figure that haunts me. I stand shoulder to shoulder in grim, callous, irritable solidarity with that wretched innkeeper. No room, no time, no way. Nobody ever dared carve him in wood and include him in the Christmas crib, have they? Sylvia Sands makes an interesting point, I think. The innkeeper is certainly part of the nativity tale, for instance, but I've never seen a creche that included an innkeeper. I suppose the consensus is the innkeeper is a bad guy in the nativity story, second only to Herod himself. No room in the inn for the holy couple. What does he do? He sends them out to the manger with the animals. No sympathy was coming from that man. He is, as Sands calls him, callous, wretched. That's the conventional wisdom on the old innkeeper. But as much as I like this piece, Absent Adventee, I think it points to yet one more secreted story, yet another Christmas story tucked away inside the familiar one we know and love. What's the secreted story? For me, it's this. Maybe the innkeeper isn't such a bad guy. It's funny how much of what's in the Bible is really what we imagine is there, but isn't there in reality. If you paid really close attention, perhaps reading the Bible, you noticed that the inn and the manger are in the nativity account in the Gospel of Luke only. It isn't found in Matthew's account. And the innkeeper? In truth, the innkeeper is never mentioned at all. We created him in our mind. The only reference at all is in Luke chapter 2, verse 7, which says that Mary brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in the manger because there was no room for them in the inn. That's it. And notice the passive voice. There was no room for them at the inn. We don't really know what happened. We're projecting a whole lot of ill will onto an imagined innkeeper. But the secreted story I imagine is this. There was no room at the inn, so presumably the innkeeper did what he could. He took pity on this young couple, the woman great with child, and he didn't have any room at the inn. He couldn't very well kick people out of the rooms who were already there, could he? So he did what he could. He made room for the couple in the manger, which was, after all, shelter and warmth, and a whole lot better than nothing. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but if he were saintly, if he were more saintly, perhaps this innkeeper would have given Mary and Joseph his own room. And while we're imagining the innkeeper, we could imagine that he had a wife. And let's imagine that the innkeeper and his wife would have spent the night in the manger instead. That would have been more saintly, more perfect. But still, he did find a creative way to help them. And given that the inn was full, the innkeeper must have been busy, stressed out, and yet still he took the time to do what he could. Probably had to rearrange a few things to put them in the manger. It wasn't perfect, but we can't, as they say, let the perfect be the enemy of the good. As Unitarian Universalist minister Maureen Killeran writes, love does not depend on perfection, but on willingness to risk connection. The innkeeper was trying. He must have been a decent guy. That's one secreted story I see in between the lines in the Gospel of Luke. And I suppose it all begs the question, what would you have done? What would I have done if we were the innkeeper? Would we find room? Would we make room? Would we take the time to find a way to help people in need even though we were very busy? Or would it be no room, no time, no way? The Christmas story is also a story of helping people in need, even when we are very busy, even when our resources seem completely tapped. So let us remember the secreted stories hidden away in the gospel as we sing our carols tonight, the stories of sisterhood, of glory come to the poor, stories of civil disobedience with righteous defiance and courage, and the story of finding time and ways to help those in need. May we continue to find new truths in this ancient tale. For as Unitarian minister Edmund Sears put it in the hymn we just sang, the days are hastening on, and there shall come the time foretold when peace shall over all the earth its ancient splendors fling. but it will only happen if we make it so. May we bring forth the time foretold. Blessed be, and amen. we come at last to the part of the service which gives the service its name, the candlelight. It is our tradition, as it is in many other churches, to light candles and sing Silent Night. In a moment, Malley will be playing some music quietly, and the ushers will come around with a flame, and we'll dim the lights when we're ready. The trick is that the lit candle is held upright, and the unlit candle dips in. So let us begin. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing Silent Night. The words of Howard Thurman. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among siblings, to make music in the heart. Blessed be, and amen. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Please be seated for our postlude.